I'm Jen and I watched a movie. It'll be fine.
You are listening to Chicagoland's finest podcast. The all-new Culture Cast begins now. I'm Nick,
And I'm Jen.
and this is the all-new Culture Cast, and we are back again.
Woo!
Today, the Gorehound is not here because he's taking a hiatus, whatever that means. I mean, I know what it means, but I don't know what it means
Sure.
in his mind. And because he's not here, I can tease him about it. Um,
Absolutely.
Today, this is an episode I've been wanting to do for a while, and I recommended it to the group chat that no one actually uses,
Sure.
except for me apparently. We're going to talk about the television series Parks and Recreation, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Came out 10 years ago, last April, so about a month ago. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to chat about it because I know you're a fan of the show.
Definitely.
I'm a fan of the show. And that's really all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so
I thought we got cut off there, but got deadly
no,
quiet.
I could not think of a good funny line to be like, yes, we're both fans of the show. Although we are both fans of the show. So I guess I could have just said that. Like, yeah, the thing you said before was true. Let me repeat it.
But before we start talking about good old Leslie Nope, let's go to one of our favorite topics. What have you been watching?
What have you been watching?
So let's see. It has been a minute. I am so far behind culturally. Like I am that person who both cares about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and has not yet seen Endgame. Um,
The Kiwi and I have not seen it either. We're trying to
oh
figure out
gosh.
to seeing it this weekend sometime, but I don't know. We'll see if
Like
that.
logistically, I mean it's by the time you add in the commercials, it's going to be almost 4 hours long, and like
Right.
I really want to see it, but also like that's 4 hours.
I have heard that it moves fast. Like you don't feel that 4 hours. So that's something. But I'm
Yeah.
seriously thinking about buying a pair of Depends and just wearing it during.
As opposed to where you normally wear them, which is just in your everyday life.
Well, yeah, that's called fashion. But
But the one thing I am completely caught up on is Game of Thrones.
oh,
As of this recording, 4 of the 6 episodes have aired, and so far the season has had its ups, it's had its deeply stupid moments. But what Game of Thrones season doesn't have deeply stupid moments?
now I'll admit I don't watch Game of Thrones. I never got on
Hmm.
that train, and I have been watching this past season because the Kiwi is a big fan of Game of Thrones. Just by proxy, I've been watching it, and it seems like there's a lot of wheels spinning so far this season.
Okay, so here's the problem with Game of Thrones, which, and I just want to clarify for fans out there. I enjoy Game of Thrones, but I also hate Game of Thrones because no one hates Game of Thrones as much as Game of Thrones fans. So
That
it's
could be said of
tough,
like any big popular genre thing.
and you know what? It's true every time. But it's the problem, of course, is you're right. It's very hard to bring something like this to a close. Now, it didn't help that they were working from with an author who had not yet finished the book series. Because once the book series is done, you kind of know where you can make cuts because you know what kind of follows through and stuff. But instead, they purchased the series. They like created the series when there were only, I believe, 3 or 4 books out. So that makes it very tough. And the problem is if the author hasn't figured out how to close off the story, it makes it very hard for a bunch of, and I'm going to use some strong language here, very stupid people who write the show to like bring it to a close. It's very tough to like to thread all those needles and make it satisfying for even a portion of your audience.
Now,
But I will say, I think that they have 2 more episodes. They may stick the landing. So far, I don't know. And it's very tough. Like I said, it's very tough because by the time the series ends, it's like, well, was that worth the like 80 plus hours that I have given of my life to the show? I guess we'll find out.
what is interesting, and again, I don't know. I don't have an intimate knowledge of Game of Thrones, just by what I've picked up by pop culture and the clips I've seen here and there.
Oh, sure.
I'm a little surprised, and maybe I'm just too used to it from other shows I've watched, that the whole battle against the White Walkers was done and seems to have little bearing other than some of the relationship growth to the battle with Cersei. I thought there'd be more interconnectivity with that.
Yeah, it's very tough. I mean, like I said, it's tough to bring a resolution that people are all going to like. And it's also tough when you feel like the showrunners and probably all the actors as well are like, can we wrap this up? But it's. So I don't know that they're giving a lot of these storylines in season 7 or season 8. They kind of, when the show first started, like moving from location to location in terms of the characters would take weeks and weeks, and now everyone just has like private jets or something. Like everything goes
They've
very
learned how to
quickly, and
teleport.
they've learned how to teleport, and which is fine because we don't really need to see them on the road for months at a time. But at the same time, you're losing. You're definitely truncating a bunch of storylines and a bunch of plots and a bunch of character development. So they're like, hey, like this thing happens. Don't worry about it. You know that old adage about showing, not telling? We do not have time for that. So here's what's going on. We're going to tell you. Don't think about it too hard. And to be fair, and like I said, as a fan, it's tough because, I have like emotional attachment to these characters. I think people who are just watching and they're like, man, I sure love it when dragons do dragon shit. Yeah, if the only thing you care about is like how much dragon there is, yeah, then you're probably very satisfied with this season. But if what you want is like character development, you're not getting as much as you'd like. So I guess that's pretty much what I'm caught up on pop culturally. What have you been watching?
Well, one thing I finally started to watch because I was kind of waiting on this is the new season of Star Trek Discovery. As I'm sure you know, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and
Mm-hmm.
the new show is, for better or worse, on the CBS All Access streaming platform.
I do not understand what any of these like I know they have that Blackish sequel about the one daughter called Grownish, but it's on
It's on Freeform.
something. If somebody asked me, okay, I need you to find this TV show, I'd be like, I guess I'll just lay down and die because I cannot. I do not know how. But I did know that the Star Trek show was going to be on the app. Now, do you have to pay for the app, or is the app free?
Unfortunately, you have to pay. It's $5 or $6 with ads, $10 without ads. And the downside to it is that, one, I get why they put the Star Trek show on the streaming app because, for better or worse, it's a niche show. It may not be successful on a
Passionate nerds.
yeah, it may not be successful on a broadcast network, and it certainly won't get the budget that the show has on a broadcast network. So I get why they did that. The downside to it is they release one episode a week, like a network show would be, versus the Netflix model, which dumped the whole season all at once. And it's also how they keep their subscribers. So I waited till the season was over, and
Hmm.
I got like I'll purchase a month, $10, that's fine. I could check out. I've been hearing good things about the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone, so I'll check that out too.
Hmm.
Which has a very like an all-star cast in it, like the anthology series. Parks and Rec's very own Adam Scott is in the series as well, so it's interesting how they're doing that.
Oh.
So I'm sitting down, I'm starting to watch the series, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about it because now that the season's done, I could binge the whole season at once. And I'm hoping the show will be an improvement over the first year. The first year was a little rocky. As you mentioned with Game of Thrones, Star Trek fans are its own worst enemy. No one hates Star Trek more than Star Trek fans. This show is very controversial because they try to do different things with it, and oddly controversial because, one, it features a gay character, which is a new thing for Star Trek, which surprisingly they never featured a gay character prior to, and also the lead of the show is a female black character played by someone whose name I can't pronounce, but she was in The Walking Dead. And of course, the internet raged against that, thinking, oh, they're just trying to pander to the social justice warriors. I can't believe they're trying to make Star Trek, so liberal. And to which I say, have you never seen Star Trek before? Because
Hmm.
one of the things Star Trek has always been was progressive. And
Didn't
talk,
they have the first like interracial kiss on TV?
yes, back in the 60s.
Yeah, I remember reading about it.
And like they featured back in the 60s.
I'm sorry, Thor just yelled from possibly our garbage can. That is correct.
He is correct in his correctness. And they featured like a black character, an Asian character, in prominent like positions in the ship, not just oh, here's your coffee, Captain. No, it's always been trying to push that diversity and things. That's one of the hallmarks of Star Trek. So I don't understand people complaining about this, especially since other Star Trek series have A, had a female lead, and B, also
Mm.
have had a black lead. But I guess if you combine them, that's too much.
Was the female lead the lady from Orange is the New Black?
That is correct. Kate Mulgrew, who played
Yes.
Captain Janeway. Anyway, we've been babbling on about nonsense for like 26 minutes now. So, let,
Call it a podcast.
yeah, let's move on to like Parks and Rec. And
Let's do it.
so, Parks and Rec celebrating its 10th year. It's always was a show that was like the little engine that could, because it's one that
Hmm.
people always liked, but never quite got the respect from general audiences. It was always on the bubble about being canceled, and uh, but it's had a healthy life, and now that Comedy Central plays it on a continuous loop, I think it'll find a second life here in repeats. But Jen, first I want to know how were you introduced to Parks and Rec?
Actually, I can tell you that. So there's kind of two stories there. The first is that a friend of mine, Mike, was like, "You should watch this show." And then I was at the library, and the DVD season was available. This is pre-streaming, or at least pre-I had streaming. So anyway, so I picked it up and I watched it. But now, if you ask Mike, I will tell him the answer is that I came up with watching it on my own, and he didn't tell me. And so if he ever asks, this is how I'll check to see if he ever listens to the podcast. Because, Mike, if you're listening, you can call me out, but only if you hear this.
So it's like an Easter egg for him to find.
Absolutely. But anyway, so I watched the entire second season because everyone said don't watch the first season. So I watched the second season, and this was like a week before the third season came out, which I believe they did as like a mid-season. I want to say it was like they started it back up in January, rather like the third season, rather than starting in September or
Yes.
the fall.
Which has an
So,
interesting story attached to that, which I could save for later.
interesting. Perfect. Yeah, I don't know what the story there is, but so I went to. But so anyway, so I like watched the show on DVD, and then a week later, the season 3 was up and running, and from there I was hooked. I thought it was pretty delightful, and I did eventually watch the first season, and I watched the entire show, mostly live because this is not entirely pre-streaming, but definitely pre Hulu, at least most of the time, and all of that. So
When I first started watching the show, I actually saw it from the first episode. I was a big fan of The Office, and this show was originally conceived to be a spin-off of The Office, which they later dropped and made it its own thing. But it does share a lot of the same crew members, like Michael Schur, who was one of the creators of the show, was one of the main producers on The Office and had a reoccurring role in that show. So I thought, okay, I'll check it out. And I disliked that first episode so much. I felt they were just trying too hard. Every character was trying to be some imitation of Michael Scott from The Office. I'm like, I'm no pass. So
yes.
I didn't pick up the show. I didn't continue to watch it. But over the series span, I would watch an episode here and there, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, it looks like it's got better. I heard it got better, but it wasn't enough for me to sit down and become a dedicated viewer like I would be for The Office or something else. And then after the show had completed its run and was on Netflix, I kind of wanted to give it a go. So the Kiwi and I decided to, I wouldn't say binge, but we
Hmm.
watched it progressively on Netflix over a period of maybe a year or so. And So
That's pretty amazing. So you weren't really a first time. You didn't really watch it live, other than
no,
here or there.
yeah, like if I for a while there it was paired with The Office, so I would watch The Office and then it would be on right afterwards. So I wouldn't turn off the TV. I would just have it on, and
Oh, sure.
I would kind of watch it from there. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. This is funny, but yeah, not enough to be like, oh, Parks and Rec is on, gotta watch it. So,
Hmm.
but
Interesting.
but yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed the show. The last season was for me. The second season was much better than the first. They clearly saw what didn't work. In a way, not I go back to The Office well on this, but in a way, it follows The Office's pattern in terms of a six episode first season that was very mixed. They saw what didn't work and saw what worked and improved upon it from season two and then onward. Season three got better. It got progressively better, I think, as the show went on. Except for I had issues with the last season. But
Hmm.
who was your favorite character on the show?
You know, that's tough. I mean, I think Donna was great. A she was like a main character, but a little bit more on the a little bit more on the
It's like
what's the
supporting
word I'm looking
side.
for. Yeah, she was a little bit more of a side character. She was great. Obviously, I think a lot of women that I knew really saw themselves in Leslie Knope because she wasn't always successful, until we get to that last season. We'll get to it. But she wasn't always successful, but she was always like very passionate, and I think a lot of people can really identify with that. Maybe not to the level of being, so binder oriented or anything, but I think the way the way that she always had good intentions and tried very hard was very appealing to young women.
Mm. Yeah, I liked how they, with Leslie, I like how they made her very progressive, but not preachy. And that's a very delicate thing you could do on a show.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
Especially since the show did have very much a female empowerment bent to it. But I also kind of liked how at times, I wouldn't say they took the piss out of it because I don't think that's a fair assessment, but how they kind of like lampooned some of that on occasion. Um,
Oh, yeah, and I think I think it's like anything else. It's like it felt very important that, like, for instance, she could pull off the Harvest Festival, and like that was very necessary to
mhm,
the storyline. But at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, like ultimately they were this small town in a small state in a doing. I mean, not even like the mayor of said small town. So it's definitely one of those things where you really feel, and I think it's interesting because you don't really see a lot about government that's not like the West Wing. And I'm
mhm.
not I'm not knocking the West Wing, but
It's always the
not
higher
everyone can
ups.
be president. Right. Not everyone can be president. In fact, it's local government that's more likely to affect more people.
Hmm.
So it was really, I liked that it was, the stakes were always high for Leslie, but that doesn't necessarily mean the stakes were high overall. Which I think is kind of a good. It's good because even if she succeeds, if she fails, it's okay because we know people aren't going to like go hungry because of it or something. It's
Right.
not like, oh, she failed to secure the funding for such and such. Now, we're going to have to go to war. It's not like that. It's like, and I think that's part of why it's so like rewatchable and why it's such a, because it does seem to have really found a lot of success in like streaming platforms and kind of it having long legs past the end of the show.
Hmm.
So I think it feels important, but at the same time, it's like low stakes enough that you can have it on while you're eating dinner or folding laundry or
Right.
uh,
It's not necessarily sit down. It's not your Game of Thrones. We have to sit down and focus on every little detail. Like they have a plot line, but
mhm.
there's a lot of like gag after gag after gag. They do a lot of good visual gags due to the documentary style nature of the show.
Yeah.
And it's light entertainment.
Exactly. It's light, but at the same time, one of the things I think, if I had to pick one of the things I thought they did the best on that show, it would definitely be the relationship between Leslie and Ben, which
Mm.
obviously they hadn't even necessarily planned from the beginning. Like that seemed to have been kind of a midway through season 2, they decide they're going to bring in, a new character.
Mm.
And I think they did such a great job on that. I have this theory that oftentimes with comedies, there's kind of one season where everything just coalesces the best. And for me, that was definitely season 3 of the show. And I think in part it was because they had this great relationship between Leslie and Ben. And I am a sucker for any time you've got a competent lady and the dummy who's in love with her. Like that is my jam. That is what I am here for. And so it was really great to see. Like, I think one of the reasons why so many women, like I said, enjoyed the show overall is because Ben was always in awe of Leslie, and like that's really nice, and that's not necessarily something you see reflected in a lot of media.
Right.
Especially when you consider the timing of the show. We're talking, so it's 2009, so we're in kind of like Knocked Up, Judd Apatow, kind of killing the rom-com, making it all like bro rom-coms, and it's like not necessarily things that are celebrating, interesting female characters, but it's more like, oh man, like you're not letting me go out for drinks with my buddies, like,
Uh,
So it was nice to see.
and I also like how at the same time they didn't make Ben out to be like incompetent himself. Like he
No,
needed Leslie to like
no,
live.
no,
Like
not like that.
he was his own. He had his own weaknesses and foibles. But like he was like completely independent, could stand alone as well. But like
Right.
they meshed extraordinarily well, and I think that relationship which you talk about, they developed it very well. Like they kind of started off as rivals, which turned
Oh yeah.
into friendship. Like it was well developed versus other shows. You introduce a love interest, and they're in the sack by the end of the 20 minutes or whatever. And
Right.
this took its time with it over the course of the third season, with plenty of ups and downs and backwards and forwards and all of that. So a very
Oh
good
yeah.
relationship.
Right. I think they really did the slow burn well. So I never watched The Office, but my friends who did, and you could attest, probably say that like the Jim and Pam relationship was the same kind of thing, where they had that kind of like slow development of a relationship. And
Um,
then
I don't know if I would agree with that because the nature of their relationship was very different.
hmm,
And because like Jim was, as the show started, Jim was head over heels in love with Pam, but she was
mhm.
engaged to someone else, and she didn't really see Jim in that way. By the second season, she started realizing that Jim's potential, for lack of a better term, that they really do connect very well. And then in the third season, after Pam breaks, spoilers, after Pam breaks it off with her engagement, Jim moved away and started dating someone else. Interesting enough, started dating Rashida Jones from Parks and Rec. Um, and so that kind of like flipped the script on their, will they, won't they? And then like by the end of the third season, beginning of the fourth, they actually were together. So they didn't drag it out the whole length of the series. That would have been antagonizing. But
Mhm.
I feel like the nature was different because when the series began, they already have known each other for a while, and that Jim's unrequited crush was permanently established. Whereas the two of them meeting and seeing the relationship develop from the first point of contact. I don't know. I don't know if I would totally agree that they were similar in vein. But anyway, I digress. So, what were we talking about again?
No, so I was gonna say I think they do the slow burn of the Leslie and Ben relationship very well. So I never watched The Office, but I did watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The
Mm,
Good Place, which are also Mike Schur productions, and
yep.
I definitely think they did well with kind of the main relationships on those shows as well. Doing the same kind of like slow burn, so it definitely seems to be kind of a hallmark of the showrunner.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen The Good Place, but I do watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I do like the development of the Jake and Amy relationship,
Hmm.
as inexplicable as it actually is. I wonder if they intended on doing that from day one, or if that was something they just decided, why don't we throw this relationship in there, and then started building it from there. But I don't know. I've never actually seen the full first season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I can't judge. But
I thought they did very well. I'm not caught up on the show right now, but it was definitely a show I enjoyed a lot. So anyway, but so I think that was definitely something they did really well on the show was that relationship, and I feel like the third season was like my favorite season of all the seasons. Although there was a period in the fourth season when Leslie was running for what was it, for city council,
yes,
and Ben ended up unemployed, but he was just sort of like wandering around because he didn't have a job, but he also didn't have much of a purpose until he ended up figuring out what he was good at. Um, and it just was very, like hashtag relatable. But also just sort of aimless Ben was one of my favorite Bens. Like I think of him holding up that doll and saying like, could a depressed person make this? Twice a week.
that was the one where he tries to make the stop motion movie,
Right.
right? It's
And he
like,
works on it for 6 weeks and it's 4 seconds long.
yeah,
Same.
and he's like trying to learn. Like I love one of the little things I like about the show are like the details, like the reoccurring
Oh,
background
sure.
gags, like Ben's love for calzone, and like just the world building that Parks and Rec did. Like you don't think about it, I think at the time, but by the time the show ends, it's built such a fascinating world out of Pawnee that
Hmm.
that most comedies I don't think have this kind of world building. Like everything from like the Sweetums factory and the shenanigans there to was it JJ's Diner to just all like the little bits that have built in this town, like the appalling history of Pawnee that
Oh, I
you
loved I loved when they'd be like, see all these blue dots? Those are where there weren't atrocities.
yeah.
But one of the things that really made the show, I think both very watchable for the first time and also very rewatchable is that ultimately you have a feeling that everyone, it's the same, you're telling these small stories and, what's nice is that everybody has sort of, maybe they have their own agenda, but they're not, you don't have a lot of conflict that comes from people being complete jerks to each other,
Hmm.
which can be really, really nice. Especially I feel like we've been going through, this period of like the golden age of television, which unfortunately a lot of times when they say, that, what they really mean is like, TV's so dark now. Isn't it great? And like, don't get me wrong, not that I just started this episode talking about Game of Thrones. So like, obviously I am part of the problem. But it's nice to just know that like, anytime you turn on Netflix, there is a show where like, people will fight, but like ultimately they all have sort of like, they're all kind at heart. And you just don't see that as often as you would like to.
Yeah, I agree, and this show definitely is a little bit brighter. It's not as going back to The Office. Well, it's not as um, not that The Office is dark, but especially in its earlier season, it had a little bit more edge to it in terms of the humor. Like it relied a lot on that cringe humor and um, on that sort of thing. But Parks and Rec is much more. It's lighter, bubblier. It's like happy root beer kind of. If you want to make a weird comparison, you're just you watch it and you smile and you're like and
Yeah, it just makes you want to be happy.
what are your thoughts on Ron Swanson?
So I think it's interesting. I think so. Okay, overall, I enjoy the character. I feel like he was very well drawn and very well acted, and I think that a lot of people who would call themselves a Ron Swanson fan sort of miss the point. Like, there's a lot of dudes out there, and some of whom are my friends who would like buy the Ron Swanson t-shirt and be like, "Oh yeah, like who doesn't like bacon and also scotch? And like, I'm not saying you can't like bacon and scotch, but I am saying I think there was on the show, it was kind of understood that like his politics, because he was, this kind of libertarian who worked for the government and, believed in kind of self-sufficiency and wanted to be as off the grid as possible. Ultimately, while he may, not carry a cell phone or whatever, he ultimately, kind of learns that he can't be completely off the grid, and he makes these relationships against his will, and he develops these friendships, and I think back to there's the episode he ends up, I believe it's season 6, he gets married, and Chris gives this toast, and he just like silently holds up the drink for a minute, and then Ron says, it's the most beautiful toast you could have given. And it's, but anyway, the point being that like they develop, he ends up developing these friendships, and I think a lot of people, probably some of whom were libertarians, were like watching the show and being like, oh man, this guy validates me, like I also have a mustache, and like didn't really understand the point that like, politically it didn't, the way he presented his politics did not jive with how like real life actually is and how his real life actually was.
Right. It's his character growth in this series that he tries to be this like a manly man's man, for lack of a better term, and
Sure.
Part of the joke is that he leads an unrealistic lifestyle, and part of his development that kind of comes to to a head in the final season is that he does develop close friendships with Leslie and the rest of them, and he missed working with them, and he wanted to work for Leslie, but then she missed their appointment. They had a falling out and all of that, and his lifestyle, like you said, is unsustainable, and that's part of the joke of him.
Right.
Like people who are like, I'm going to live just like Ron Swanson. Well, you can't. The show is kind of mocking that lifestyle because Ron Swanson's a cartoon character, in essence. And like people say, like Ron Swanson's my spirit animal. Like, ugh,
No.
yeah, no, you're not. And I'll admit, like in terms of my own personal beliefs, the core idea of like Ron there, like I kind of get, I kind of buy into many shades of it, but I also know that's not a realistic lifestyle that you can lead in life.
Right.
And again, part of the joke is that he's very anti-government, but he works for the government.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, and I think they do a great job with him. I feel like it was also a show that generally like served its characters very well. Like you definitely got the feeling that like the writers had affection for the character, almost to the characters, almost I think to the detriment of storytelling. Again, I'm going back to season 7. Like I will admit, so here's kind of where I am on season 7, right? Season 6 is the one where, so Leslie and Ben have gotten married, and that was great. They developed their relationship, that was great. They got married, that was great. And then, just like in real life, they got pregnant with triplets. And I was so mad. I was so mad because first of all, like I don't watch a kind of hangout adult work comedy so that I can like watch people be pregnant with triplets. And to the show's credit, they didn't do like the full season of like wacky pregnancy or whatever. Right. I think she was only pregnant for like an episode or 2, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, before they like jumped 3 years or something.
Right. Well, they do a time jump 3 years in the last season. So that I think, or 3 years. Yeah, I think it was 3 years. So that did help. No, 7 years. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, they do a time jump in the last episode, and so so we don't have to watch her like have wacky, like, holding all these babies or whatever. That could have been very exhausting.
I'm glad they didn't do that either. I mean...
Yeah, and it's one thing if it's, like, a family sitcom or whatever. Obviously, that's a different sort of thing, but I was just, like, not there for it. I do think the last season you kind of get... I think the last season definitely suffers from kind of giving everybody, like, wish fulfillment. And, like, everyone has to be paired off. And, like, everybody has to be, kind of living their best life. And, like... on the one hand, did I feel like the show had kind of earned it because they'd spent all this time with these characters and developed them and whatever, and like, okay, fine. But like, at the same time, as a consumer of the product, I did not find it very compelling. And, I'm glad I watched it. I stuck with it because I thought I almost gave it up at the end of season 6, but I was intrigued by the premise of the time jump, so I stuck with it. And I'm glad I watched it, but at the same time, like, I'm never going to put those episodes on again,
Yeah, I didn't like. I mean, the last season was fine, but I feel like it was. Like when a show is going on too long and they're like, we need to revitalize the format to make it viable. That's what season 7 was. Like they reset the playing board. And on one hand, I appreciate the ballsy nature of them doing that. But on the other hand, it just, I don't know, a lot of it didn't work for me. I did like the little future gag jokes, like the holographic cell phones, and like I think they have like a Game of Thrones reference that says like, "Oh, Game of Thrones is ending tonight. You're going to miss it." And how do we know how Captain Jack Sparrow is going to be? And people are like, "I don't even understand the show anymore."
Hmm?
And
Especially that one crazy gag they had about the Cubs winning the World Series.
oh, did they have? I don't remember that.
They did. They did. They go to Chicago. I don't remember why they go to Chicago.
'Cause Tom wanted to creep on that girl.
Yes, Tom wanted to creep on that girl, who's now, by the way, on a sitcom that I accidentally watched called Abby's Bar, and it is absolutely dreadful.
I was about to say that it looks pretty bogus.
It's it's an interesting premise in that it appears to be about a woman who just like sort of opened a bar in her backyard and like has a whole bunch of customers. And like the cast is good, like all like it's like the janitor from Scrubs and Robbie from New Girl and like I don't know some other people I've never seen before. And then but I just like watched it and I was like I don't understand who the target market of this show is. Like
Anyone who's willing to watch.
People who think that opening bars in backyards are good. Very strange. Like I sort of believe it was a prank someone was playing on me.
Let's see how far we can get away with this. The last episode I was not a fan of. I think it does exactly what you were saying in that it's the wish fulfillment that said, oh, and here's what happens to this person. Here's what happens to this person. And it was cool seeing some of that, but as an episode, I'm like, ugh, all right.
Yeah, it's sort of, and like I want Leslie to be successful, but I also don't think there's any path where she ends up president.
I was going to ask you about that. Who do you think was actually president? Because they leave it ambiguous with...
They do. I mean, technically it could be Ben, but I don't think it's Ben. Because, and this is important, I just don't know that I believe that Ben would have the drive to do it. I think Leslie would have the drive to do it. But I don't think she could debase herself in the way you have to in order to get to president. So that's where it like really fell apart for me. It was like I don't buy this. I like it. It's some nice wish fulfillment, but like no, that's not what happened to these characters. And in part, like I said, I think that's because the one thing the show suffered from the longer it went on, besides the usual, like it's just hard to keep a comedy on for a long time, right? Like Friends was good, but like definitely in the later seasons, you see them, anytime you have a dumb character, the longer the show goes on, the dumber the character gets to the point where you're just like, how are you wearing pants in the morning?
Yeah, like Andy is just kind of too dumb to live sometimes.
Was definitely suffering a bit there. So anytime the longer the comedy goes on, the broader the comedy gets. But,
right.
And that can be really tough when you've kind of you've made your bread and butter on how like specific the story was. Like Pawnee had to be Pawnee. This story could not have taken place in New York City. This could not have taken place in, it had to take place in like a, little town in
Indiana.
Indiana, right. Like it just couldn't exist, and they built up this very specific place and then just, didn't, so, kind of broadening it out and being like, okay, well, we've got to like, now they have to have new challenges, and the challenges have to get bigger and bigger, and it's not enough that they all work for the Parks Department because, and that is kind of the long-term problem with the Office sitcom, any Office sitcom, is that, eventually you're like, no way would these people still work in this same company, you know?
Right.
So you have to come up with reasons why they're not succeeding that also aren't major bummers for everyone.
Right. In regards to that final season, I I I don't know if this is true or not because I can't find any concrete, but I thought I had heard that they weren't planning on coming back for a seventh year. Like NBC wasn't going to renew them, so they wrote the sixth
Mm.
season as like a wrap up, which the sixth season does kind of feel like that. Or the last episode, like they're going to be pregnant, they're going to have a new job, kind of open up new avenues, and then it was like a surprise, almost a surprise renewal that they came back for the seventh season. So they're kind of like, oh, well, we're kind of stuck in this hole we wrote us in. Well, we'll just write everyone off and see what their futures are like. But I don't know if that's true. So anyone who listens to this that says Nick, you're wrong, I might be, but I thought I did read that. But
Yeah,
there you go.
there's always sort of they'd already gotten to their 100 episodes at that point, which is what you
Hmm.
need for syndication. And I believe other than the first season, every season was like 22 episodes or thereabouts. So they would have already hit their 100 episodes. So at that point, I don't know financially, what makes them decide to keep going. Because obviously the longer the show goes on, the more expensive everything is. The
Right.
actors are more expensive, the crew is more expensive. Um, newer shows are cheaper because they're brand new. So at that point, they must have felt like I'm assuming that somebody, at the network really liked the show and wanted to save it or wanted to keep it on because it was also, I mean, it did okay numbers, especially compared to like today's fractured TV landscape. But I
Right.
don't think it ever did, buco
No,
crazy numbers.
it averaged like early on. It averaged around 4 million viewers, and then it kind of leveled off to around 3 million viewers overall. Which is still like you think like, well, that's a lot of people. Like, well, then look at Big Bang Theory, and that gets like 11 million viewers for per episode. So it did good enough to like just skate by, but it was always on that bubble. Like, is NBC going to take it back? But NBC had a good relationship with Michael Schur and his production company, and the show was critically acclaimed. So that always pushes a show
Definitely.
in favor of renewal. So yeah, um, you know, I'm glad they skipped over the pregnancy because you're right. It gets exhausting seeing pregnancy shenanigans. Um,
There's only so many new insights they're going to
right.
have about pregnancy on TV, I feel.
I mean, it could have been funny given how over the top Leslie is with planning everything, seeing how she would be as planning like motherhood and like she'd be pregnant for a week and already have a binder of the whole kid's life or something. Like I could see a couple of gags they could milk out of it, but not enough to
Yeah,
sustain like a 9 month season. But I will say, had they gone that route, I think it would have been okay because they did a similar storyline on The Office in which Jim and Pam had a kid, but the fact that well, one they wrote it in because Jenna Fisher was pregnant in real life, so they wrote it in on the show, and then another they just wanted to write it in, and it was such a background element that like you never really saw the kids on the show at all after they were born. They kept it strictly an office environment. So
which I think helps. I
yeah,
definitely think that helps. Again, for an office sitcom,
right,
taking place in an office,
right. But I
you
mean,
just don't need too much. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, the triplet thing also bothered me. I'm not saying that never happens in real life,
well, they
but
they foreshadowed that. I think that was a reference back.
really,
In the episode where Amy Poehler goes on the date with Will Arnett and he
uh
gives her
huh.
the MRI, he makes a comment like, "Wow, your womb is huge. You could at least have three of them in there."
Oh my
And
god,
it's like an offhanded line, which I wonder if they brought that back, which is the reason they gave him the triplets.
I'm gonna be so mad if I ever find Mike Schur and then corner him in a elevator somewhere and ask him if that's what happened.
I mean, given the attention to detail the show has, and given that I think that sixth season was going to be the last, I could see them doing like some callback like that. But then they realized,
Oh my
oh,
god.
we now have to give her three kids, unless one mysteriously dies, in which case that'd be too dark for our show.
Oh my god. No, I think if they started like killing random babies on TV, that might be on Parks and Rec. I think I would have to change my assessment. I'd be like, man, the first 6 seasons were like really good at telling small stories, and then it just got. Oh my God! Wait, I just remembered. Here's who actually my favorite character was. It was Jen Barkley. She was the one who is played by Catherine Hahn, and she was brought in as
Oh,
a consultant. And
yes.
there's one point, I believe it's in the 7th season, where she comes over to Ben and Leslie's house, and they have like 20 children at this point. And she like comes in wearing a poncho, and she's like, "Your life is the worst. My life is great."
I remember that.
Honestly, goals.
Um, yeah. What are some of your favorite bits, reoccurring bits on the show?
Okay. Let me think. So I really enjoyed the way they had uh, the shoe shine stand in the first, and I'm sorry, in the first and second season. No, maybe just the second season for Andy. I thought that was pretty delightful. Like you could see they had a lot of fun like decorating the set there.
Hmm.
Like you see April, like there's a picture of him in April at one point, and they kind of build that up, and he just kind of like makes it his own like little space, and I always thought that was pretty cute. The atrocities, as mentioned, anytime they brought in Ken Hote, he was
Oh,
pretty delightful.
yeah.
There's in the Harvest Festival episode, he says something about like white people love, Matchbox 20 and curses. And later in the episode, you see that Matchbox 20 is playing that night at the amphitheater or whatever. So that was pretty, anytime you had him pop up, he was pretty great. What else did I love? I always enjoyed. I think they also did great stuff with like the set decoration in Leslie's office. Like there's always something weird, or like I liked her like kind of apolitical wall of female heroes. Where she had like Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton, and
I think did she have like Margaret Thatcher in there too, or
she
something?
may have also had Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, she was. So that was pretty fun. What about you? What are some of your favorite
Um,
gags?
I like the bit surrounding little Sebastian and how
Oh, yeah.
like Ron like views Sebastian as like a hero, and Ben just does not understand it.
Ben is
Um,
the only one in town who doesn't get it.
yeah.
It's the small horse.
Um, I liked oh, I'm blanking on what I was about to say. Um, anytime Perd Hapley showed up, I always was a fan of him.
Oh. And anytime he pops up in anything since then, I'm just like, oh look, it's Perd Hapley. Um, he's he's still, and he was a real newscaster.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
I think makes it even better. But he just had the best delivery of anything.
I can't think of the reporter. Who's the reporter?
Joan Calamezzo.
No, the younger one.
Shauna Malway-Tweep.
That's her. I love like when you got little insights to her awful life.
She's in a Dairy Queen commercial now,
She's
and
been in a bunch. She's become a commercial actress because I've seen her in like
yeah.
a tax commercial, and I think she was in a commercial for some like Imodium type of pill. So, um, but no, I liked that. I liked the reoccurring bit of Ben always taking the accountant job, only for them to like quit on the first day.
Yeah, no.
Um,
They did a lot of like that was a show where I'm sure there was this great like I don't know, Twitter or something, somebody had posted where they basically had posted a bunch of like writers rooms. So it was like Lost, and it was, I can't remember what the other one was, and then it was like writers rooms, and you'd see like all these index cards on the wall. And then, of course, the last room was Glee, and there were no cards whatsoever on the wall. And you were like, oh, because they don't care about the characters at all. But this was definitely a show where I felt like they had like very specific. There was like a show Bible, and they knew they were like,
mhm.
okay, we're gonna track Shauna. Shauna Malway-Tweep is going to appear 11 times in the entire show, but we are going to have a file on her and like, don't even worry, like we are not going to like, we're not going to like forget how many siblings people have or what sort of things are going on in their life. It was they really, they cared about their characters, and that included like, I think down to like even the smaller characters, the people who popped up, a handful of times. They still seemed to like care about them and like would advance their storylines, and it was very interesting to kind of see how they would manage to kind of keep that going over the years.
Was there anything about the show that you or bits that you weren't a fan of?
Um, hmm. You know, I think I think sometimes they didn't know what to do with Aziz Ansari's character, Tom Haverford.
Yeah.
Especially as the show kind of went on, because that was another case where like you want him to, you care about the character, you want him to be successful, but if he's successful, there's no reason he should still be in the office every week. So, you have to kind of temper his success in a way that.
Enter John Ralphio.
By the way, in real life, I got to meet real life John Ralphio I went to California and saw a UCB show. And while I was in the lobby buying a sweatshirt, he like popped up and I was like, can I take a photo with you? It's the only thing I care about. And it is to this day on my wall.
Like, was he there like as a fan of the?
No. He was like one of the, UCB is a theater that does like improv, and so a lot of times they'll bring in.
Oh, is it like Upright Citizens Brigade?
Yeah, Upright
Okay,
Citizens
okay.
Brigade. So it's an improv show. So he was one of the guys who was in the improv show, and I was visiting my aunt, and I was like, I really want to see this while I'm out here. Like, it'd be so cool. And then he was there, and I was like, this is a show I love. Like,
I'm surprised he went out to the lobby area.
Oh, yeah, I don't know why he did that. Obviously, I was going to ask him to take a picture. And, like, my aunt, who has lived in L.A. for 30 years, was like, okay, I just want you to understand, like, small child from Illinois, where there are very few celebrities. I want you to understand, like, you can't just, like, go bother the celebrities. You have to let them be people. And I was like, okay, so, like, like, she's like, I don't care if you see Brad Pitt in the grocery store. You can't, you can't be up on, you can't be bothering these people. And I was like, definitely. And then he walked through the lobby and I was like, nope, I'm going to ask him for a photo. But to be fair, he also, could have gone out the back way. He went through the lobby. Granted, it was enough past the show that there were not very many people left, but I was still like, I don't care. Fuck it, I'm going to go ask him.
One of the things that kind of bugged me on the show, I wasn't a fan of Billy on the Street. Billy.
Billy Eichner. Yeah, they brought him in the 6th season.
Yeah, I don't think his character was too cartoony.
He was a little cartoony. Yeah, and it's like I said. I think shows, especially the longer they go on for comedies, can get very broad, even if they are very specific to start with. And so he felt both like unnecessary, but also, yeah, just like too broad. Just like, who was writing this, and like, how did he escape from? Because like when he does his Billy on the Street thing, like that feels like a place where you kind of understand what's going on, whereas it just felt like they brought him in, and instead of giving him direction, they were just like, just be loud.
Like he felt like he was one of those characters that should have been like a one-off, and you never see him again, but they kept bringing him back.
Right, they were like, now he's a member of the Parks Department, and you're like, oh, but why? And I, to be fair, he's been in other stuff, and he does not always play that guy.
Right.
But they made him play, they had him play that guy, and I just don't think, and, for a different show, I think that could have worked, or for a different amount of episode, it could have worked, but, oh, man, yeah, you're right, that was one thing that I just, it's like, I don't, what test market did this work with?
Oh. And then, we're getting kind of long here. I just, one last question I guess I have for you. I want to know what your thoughts are on this. When Ben came on the show, he essentially was replacing the Mark character, played by Paul Schneider. What are your opinions on Mark? Because I find that he's he has a polarizing opinion online amongst Parks and Rec fans.
So here's the thing. So when I watched the second season, so like I said, I marathoned that on DVD. I watched the second season, and then at the end of the second season, he like shows up with plans, like blueprint plans, and he like kisses her on the cheek and says like, "Oh, I'm leaving or whatever." And I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe they're getting rid of Mark. Like, Mark's so great. Like, why would they get rid of Mark?" And then like the third season started up, and at that point you have Adam Scott now, and you have Rob Lowe playing Chris, and and I just never thought about Mark again.
Neither did the show because he's never referenced.
Nope, that's not true. There is one episode where Anne, I can't remember. I think she had started dating a bunch of guys in, following her breakup with Chris maybe, and or something. But there was something where she's like at an event and she's like giving away or selling boxes of like her ex's old stuff. So she's like pulling out these boxes that are filled with like her ex's things or whatever. And the point was she and Leslie were kind of fighting because they had because Leslie felt like she just would like leech on to the personality of whoever she was dating. So, and she's like yelling at her about it. And I swear, if I'm remembering correctly, they had a Mark box. Now I have to go back and check because I'm going to feel like a really big jerk if they didn't have a Mark box.
I would be surprised.
Mark.
I'd be surprised if they didn't. I'm just going off of the Wikipedia page. It says he was never mentioned again, but maybe as a prop he was mentioned. But
I think that would be somehow more insulting. Definitely this should be the last thing, but I will say I think one thing the show did great was the relationship between Anne and Leslie. Like, you don't have as many like very good female friendships like that on TV, and it was always wonderful. And the fact that like they were allowed to be really flawed, and like Leslie's big problem was that she would always steamroll Anne and kind of tell Anne what Anne should want to do, and and that all just felt like very real and very earned. Like it wasn't, it was this very like deep and real friendship, but at the same time, it was not without its problems or that were built in like a kind of character space. Right. So anyway, just quick shout out. But so, what did you think of Mark? Have you thought of Mark?
The first season I didn't care for him because I thought he was too much of a dude bro, and I don't know what they were trying to do, and he was like sleeping around, and Leslie was all hung up on him like a sick puppy, right. And but I think the second season I liked him a whole lot more. Like he got into a relationship with Anne, he became, I don't want to say more normal, but like he became more tolerable. I liked he was a good foil for Andy.
That's true.
And I was somewhat disappointed when they got rid of him. But I mean, we got a trade-off. I think we got they upgraded. But I would have liked to see how he would have interacted with the new characters and the situations that were presented. But at that point, the cast was getting so big that someone had to go. And I guess the actor who played Mark left on his own accord. Like, I don't think he was fired necessarily. I think they just didn't know what to do with him after a while. But
yeah, I'm kind of under the impression he like left to go do movies. And the only movie I ever saw him in, I'm not saying he hasn't been in other movies, but the only thing where I was like, oh hey look, it's Mark. It was Water for Elephants. So big cultural moment there, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page, and I don't see anything of note.
Yeah, I just don't feel like I've seen him hanging out.
Oh, he was in the assassination of Giovanni Versace, so that's something.
Oh, that is a good.
He was in 2 episodes of that. Yeah, I'm looking at. God, even his Wikipedia page is kind of sad. Like the picture that they have is like, it looks like it's a random photo that you would take when like you see us. Okay, it'd be like say the actor who plays John Ralphio, if his Wikipedia picture was the picture you took with him. That's what this looks like on Paul Schneider's page. But
amazing. I mean, and maybe it is half of a fan photo somewhere.
And the funny thing is, like, he's like half cut off in the picture. Like, this is the best picture you have of him.
I feel that way sometimes when I'm on like LinkedIn and I look around and there are plenty of people with good photos, and then there are people where you're like, You were in the background at somebody's wedding and you just cropped that shit. Why do you think you will get hired with this weird, sad photo?
So I guess we should probably wrap this up here.
Absolutely.
I
Let's wrap it up, and everyone get on that watching the show. I think it's a recommendation from us, right?
Yeah, definitely. Before Netflix takes it down in 2021, supposedly. So
Oh.
I before we go, I want to bring it back full circle to the trivia fact I had earlier on.
Sure.
It's trivia time.
So we were talking about how Parks and Rec. I want to pull up the episode list here. How Parks and Rec had a third season that started in January
Mm-hmm.
of that particular year. The first 6 episodes of the third season of Parks and Rec were actually filmed at the tail end of when they were doing the filming of season 2 because Amy
Hmm.
Poehler was pregnant at the time.
Oh, sure. That
And
makes sense.
they wanted to film around because when the season was going to get back started for a fall release date, she was going to be preggers, and they wanted to film around that. So they filmed pretty much all the Harvest Fest episodes, or all the ones that featured Rob Lowe before he was left the cast for a while, because he was only supposed to be a guest star, not a cast member. But they liked him so much that they made him full-time cast member.
Hmm.
But the irony in all that is that the third season's release date was pushed back to January, so them filming those episodes early wouldn't have made a difference.
Because she would have not been pregnant at that point.
By the time they would have started up, she would have probably been past the pregnancy, or at least enough where they could have filmed around it.
Hmm.
So the more you know.
That is very interesting and also very funny.
Television production fascinates me on so many levels about how they try to do things to accommodate a variety of things. All right, I gotta get to sleep because it's way past my bedtime,
Right.
and this episode is way longer than I expected. All right, let's get out of here. I'm Nick,
I'm Jen.
and this has been the All New Culture Cast. We'll see you next time, whenever that will be. You've been listening to the All New Culture Cast, where every episode is all new. Check out new episodes and our back catalog at allnewculturecast.libsyn.com. We can also be found on iTunes. The All New Culture Cast, a saltwater production, copyright 2019. Thanks for listening. Because it's kind of difficult to, dogs can't really feed themselves when they're at home and all that other fun stuff. And
I mean, they can. They're just gonna eat it all at one time and
True.
then be sad.
yeah, and then the bathroom situation.